there. So a bunch of folks on my mailing list asked for a breakdown video on this short arrangement I posted a couple weeks ago of Summertime, the George Gershwin standard. So here is that breakdown. This is going to be a much more free-form video than most of the theory videos I put on this channel. But I'm going to focus on kind of taking you behind the scenes of what I was thinking about when I created that arrangement. And we may actually talk some musical specifics as they come up along the way. But we're going to focus on the mindset and how I arrived at the arrangement myself. So first, let's watch a little bit of that arrangement together so I can refresh myself and you can also get a refresher, or maybe you haven't seen it yet. Okay, and I'll pause it there for now. I go on to a second time through the form. So that's once through the form, the main form of the song, which repeats. And so I played the form again with a little bit of a solo. But that's plenty for now. Okay, so I want to start by just describing my own personal relationship to this particular song. And if you are a jazz musician and you're kind of building your repertoire of standards, this is a pretty common experience that you'll revisit a song at different points in your life and different points in your development as a musician. So I first played this song when I was in high school, some sort of combo rehearsal, I remember. I don't think it was even in a school setting. I was like getting together with some friends and we were picking jazz standards to play together, and somebody brought in a chart for Summertime. I'd never played it before. I might have heard it. Okay, so that chart probably looked something like this. This is a lead sheet. So, a lot of times when we're learning a jazz standard, especially when we're younger, we're going to just be going straight from a lead sheet, which means you see the melody written out in traditional sheet music notation, chord symbols written above. And my memory of the first time I learned the song, actually, I remember it being set in D minor, so it was probably not this same chart that we're looking at here, but it was similar in approach, where it was a lot of these subtle variations of chords, and because I was playing this. I was new to learning to improvise, and I was playing this in this small combo with other relatively beginner jazz musicians. My main goal was to try to make sense of it in my ear and simplify it a little bit. So the kind of lead sheet high school TED version of playing this song would have been more like this. So I'll play it in the same key that we're going to end up in for my more recent arrangement. But first of all, I probably was treating all of the minor chords as minor 7 chords. So since we're in the key of C minor, I would have been playing C minor 7. And the only reason for that is because I treated every single chord as a 7th chord. And if it was a minor chord, I was likely to just play it as a minor 7 chord. And what I've learned a little later in my life is that a lot of times, if you really want that minor tonality, it's nice to play the 1 chord as a minor 6 chord instead, or just a straight minor triad, or maybe minor major 7. This sound is a lot more kind of neutral. But anyway, okay, so the first way that I might have played the song would have sounded a little more like this if I had to play it solo piano. I think that's fairly accurate as to how I might have approached it at the time, right up until that minor sixth chord I played at the end. That was present day Ted coming out and my taste for what I wanted to hear. Okay, because the other element of how the way that how I approached the harmony changed from when I was first playing this song to when I revisited it more recently to prepare for this short arrangement I did for this channel, is that this time I was going much more off of listening to some reference recordings and using my ear and picking up on the elements of the harmonic language here that I am most attracted to in Gershwin's writing. In the original orchestration of this, that one chord, that minor chord that starts and ends the form, is treated as a minor sixth chord. So that's why my ear is kind of attached to that sound now. Let me give a little bit more details on what was going on at that time too, and how I might have approached the song. So first of all, I mean, I was never very comfortable with playing solo piano for a long time. You're completely unsupported when you're playing alone at the instrument. But if I did have to play a standard alone at the piano, I would probably play the melody right in this middle register, just because that's where it's typically written on a lead sheet. And again, I was very dependent on learning things from lead sheets. And I probably would have been using voicings like I just demonstrated. So a lot of maybe root position voicings or root position leaving out the fifth, occasionally doing more advanced kind of arranging approaches where I was splitting up notes between the two hands. And the general kind of rhythmic approach in the left hand is basically whole notes with sometimes these more like jazz comping rhythms, something like this. Like little upbeats like that, which work really well if you're using your left hand with a jazz rhythm section, because they just add a little bit of like texture and harmonic accompaniment to everything. But my feeling on that has shifted over time, that I don't feel that makes a lot of sense most of the time if you're playing alone at the piano, because those little upbeat accents that you play in your left hand with a rhythm section, they depend on this like contrast against the steady foundation that you're hearing from, say, the bass player and the drummer. But if that's not present, then basically you're asking the audience to imagine those things, or else they're not going to hear that contrast. So sometimes it works really well, but for the most part, I prefer to actually create the foundation with my left hand, playing something more like a stride left hand. And then if I want that kind of nice tension, push and pull that you get in swing music between the quarter note and the swung eighth note, then I'm going to create that more like between the two hands. Okay, so yeah, that's the approach to harmony and rhythm. And as I said, that first chord is a really good example where I would have just treated it as a minor seven chord because that's what it might have said on the chart, or that's what I was most comfortable with, as the one chord in a minor key. Not necessarily because that's actually the harmony that Gershwin would have written. And jazz musicians do this a lot. I mean, this is part of the fun of like reinterpreting songs as a jazz musician. You can just shift things to whatever kind of harmonic language you want to hear. So if you'd rather hear a minor seven chord than a minor six chord, you can just play a minor seven chord. No one's going to sue you. And the only reason I'm bringing it up here is that I like the sound of that minor sixth tonality, especially in the context of this song. And the shift that happened over time from like the 15 years between when I first played the song from a lead sheet and when I revisited it 2 weeks ago, is that I'm now able to rely much more on my ear and make decisions about how I want to play harmony that just come down to my personal taste. So with all these things I'm describing in this video, my hope is that for all of you, you'll get to experience similar changes over time where you might be more reliant on some other resources. But as you develop as a musician, you can start to rely more on your ear and your own personal taste. Okay, what did I do when I did revisit this to prepare for my own arrangement? Like I said, I used my ear. I picked a specific recording that I really like of this song, which is the Ella Fitzgerald and Louis Armstrong recording. And it's similar. I looked it up on Wikipedia. It seems like this this album did have a different arranger. It's not just the straight Gershwin orchestrations from Porgy and Bess, which is the kind of opera that this is from. But it's really, really close to, if you listen to like the opera original orchestration of it. This arranger was obviously mimicking that really closely and just adapting it for Ella and Louis. So this is how it sounds. Ah, okay. Okay, and it goes on from there. So you hear that initial movement back and forth between those two chords. So as I was revisiting this song, I was curious to get closer to what that is. They're in B minor, so let's hang in B minor for just a sec. If you play it as a minor 7 chord, that sounds so different from what we just heard on the recording. So I came back to this recording and I was like, okay, what is actually going on there? And I tooled around with it a little, and what I seemed to find was this minor 6 alternating with a minor 6 chord a whole step higher, which those two things taken together make this kind of like a melodic minor palette. And I think that kind of defines that eerie, static sound of the beginning of this piece. That was fun to discover because I wanted to include that in my own interpretation of the song, and it's more true to the spirit of what Gershwin wrote. So moving on from there, there were other little details that I picked out just by ear listening to the recording. We'll go back to C minor. So one thing that I heard was some of these inner voices, like in the string section or the winds playing these little moving melodies underneath the main vocal melody. So I tried to adopt a few of those for my arrangement. So that includes this part where it goes, and then this part where it goes, and finally, a little later in the song, this thing. So those are all just stolen melodies that come straight from Gershwin and how he orchestrated this. And then there was one other step. So, I'm always pushing students to rely more on their ears when they can, because it's fun. You can see that if you can pick things out either by trial and error or just through, ear training to where you can recognize things easily just using relative pitch, hearing, interval relationships or hearing chord functions. It's so freeing to be able to just pull up a recording that you like and figure out what's going on. It also remains useful to find and use written resources as they're available. So one other thing that I did, just out of curiosity, is that I went to IMSLP. If you don't know IMSLP, that is this wonderful website where all sorts of public domain scores are available for free. So, anything like 100 years old or older, which is most classical music, is actually in the public domain. So you can buy sheet music for it, but you don't have to pay royalties for it in order for it to be legal. And so IMSLP has this huge repository of public domain scores that people have uploaded. It's really useful if you ever want to find sheet music to a public domain piece that you're curious about. And it's funny because I didn't even realize until I was pulling this back up for this explainer video that this piece is not yet in public domain. But IMSLP still had a score that someone transcribed by ear. So this, I think, is actually only legal in Canada as something that you could sell. But so anyway, I went and I looked at this orchestral score, and this seems to be quite an accurate transcription of the original Gershwin orchestration. You see all sorts of interesting things, and the place where it really gets into that main part that we're starting with under the melody is here. And you see exactly that same thing that I heard by ear. So it's this movement between, I'm doing a quick reduction here of what we see in the second violins and the cello, that we're moving back and forth between B minor 6 and C sharp minor 6. So 1 minor 6 and then 2 minor 6. This is also in B, like the Ellen Louis version. And by the way, I picked C minor for my key just because I like the way it sounds on my piano, and I wanted something a little different from the recording I was working from. So yeah, this was just really interesting for me to look at because it confirmed. I now know, okay, whoever wrote this was also working by ear, but it can be nice. It's the same deal as when you're like learning a standard by ear and then you just check with a lead sheet. Most of those lead sheets were also generated by somebody who was just using their ears, not necessarily by the original composer. But at least you're getting to check your work against somebody else's. And sometimes you'll pick up interesting things. You sometimes will actually maybe be more accurate than whoever made the lead sheet, or whatever editorial decisions they made. But it can be nice to go back and forth from using your ear to finding whatever written resources you can. And I see students doing this all the time to great effect, that maybe you'll start with your ear, go find whatever resources you can to kind of fill out your approach to a song, and then go back to using your ear and recordings that you love of a song if you're going to cover a song or make your own arrangement. So, okay, that's the kind of prep part. Now we can get a little deeper into what I did for this specific solo piano arrangement once I had kind of found the basic elements of the song that I wanted to play. You know, at this point, okay, I feel comfortable in playing this melody in any key from memory. And so on. I'm comfortable with the harmonic structure that I figured out, both from using that initial lead sheet that I referenced earlier in my life, and then having kind of played it from memory based on that lead sheet on gigs for a long time, and revisiting the recording more recently and adjusting my knowledge of the harmony of the song a bit. I have these like inner moving voices that I want to include in the arrangement if I can. And so I have kind of all the pieces. I have the bones, the constituent parts of what I think is most important and interesting about this song. Now I'm going to make my own arrangement of it. Here I'll talk just a little bit more like big picture about what I think makes for a good arrangement, because I love arranging. What you get to do when you're an arranger is you get to decide whatever you think needs to be preserved about the original musical material. And then you can change it however you want. So that's important to note. Like, I decided in this case that I wanted to use that same initial chord movement that Gershwin did, but you don't have to. Like, you could do a different version of this where the harmony is totally different. And maybe the only thing you're trying to preserve is the melody. I don't know. That's the first thing that came to mind just improvising there. Was like, okay, well, maybe I'll just leave the same bass note on the bottom for a while, that A flat. There's so many different things that you can do, and people get really creative this way with covers. And I decided that the things that I really liked and wanted to keep were that kind of harmonic structure that's coming more straight from Gershwin, the basic shape and notes of the melody, although I messed with the rhythm of the melody a lot to suit my playing style. And then a few of the lines from the inner moving voices. So beyond that, then what you want to do is you want to play to the strengths of the situation you're arranging for. So that means playing to the strengths of the instrumentation you're arranging for. It means playing to the strengths of the specific performer that you're arranging for. And it means thinking about the venue that this is for, when you do have control over that. So in this case, the instrumentation is my upright piano, one instrument. The performer is me, and the venue is basically Instagram, right? The venue is YouTube Shorts. So I'm thinking about people literally watching this on their phones. So all of those things play into the arranging decisions, believe it or not. Because I was specifically making a short for this channel. I was like, I want to have fun and just do a quick arrangement of a standard. So, okay, instrumentation. I'm arranging in this case for solo piano and for my particular strengths as a pianist. I'm not the most like flashy virtuosic improviser, so I didn't create the arrangement around some sort of big extended improvised solo. And in general, I'm a little more comfortable with like premeditated arranging decisions, especially when it comes to harmony, than I am with elaborate improvised like reharmonizations of things. So I decided to make my arrangement pretty much through composed, but also with a little bit of room for improvisation because I am an improviser, and it tends to feel a little bit looser and better to me if I don't decide every single note ahead of time. So I didn't actually like write this out on score paper, but I made most of the decisions about like what register am I going to play in, what's the kind of groove and style, even some specific voicing decisions. And then the venue part plays in that I was also thinking about like, okay, what frequencies come through really well on phone speakers. So that's part of why I started the melody up here instead of down here, because I feel a melody played up here is much stronger, more recognizable, carries through better on phone speakers. And then I decided in terms of groove that I wanted to play to my strength with kind of this tempo of stride piano, which I really enjoy playing solo piano. I like the kind of light swing feeling that I can create alone at the piano that way. And yeah, the point with all of these things is like, I would have made totally different musical decisions if someone came to me and was like, I want you to do a string quartet instrumental arrangement of this song, or we have a rhythm section. How are you going to arrange this for them to support a vocalist singing this song? Honestly, in that case, I probably just would let them improvise. But the instrumentation matters so much, and even knowing who you're writing for when that's possible, these things really matter when you're making arranging decisions. So yeah, those are the big things that I was thinking about. And then I just kind of played around and experimented and tried to find things I liked. So I liked this feeling of having the left hand moving back and forth between the 1 minor 6 and 2 minor 6 sound, maybe with sometimes going to a different bass note for one of those chords to keep kind of moving the bass up and down directionally in that whole first part of the song where it's the one chord. So the way I'm thinking about this is like 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, and then we go to 4. And the 4 is a minor 7 chord. This more open sound. And here's where we have the little those inner moving voices. Here I did kind of a passing chord thing, moving up through, this is like a secondary dominant or maybe like 7 diminished 7 of the 5. Then I grabbed that other inner voice, 5 of 5, back to 5. I went back to where we started. Oh, I think I went some sort of G arpeggio, because we're on a G dominant 7 chord here. And I like that effect as kind of a fill between the first and second half of the form. It also creates a nice contrast that at the beginning of the second half of the form, then the melody is up to a higher octave. Oh, and if I'm remembering right, I also did kind of a rolled tremolo in my right hand for the melody there. And then here, that is ripped from the Gershwin harmony. And that's a big difference between how I played this and thought of it earlier in my life. I just thought of this as like, okay, we're going 2-5-1 to the relative major. So I would have done that. That's a very like jazz musician reharmonization of this. But actually what happens is that it works its way to this 4 dominant sound, which is now like 2 dominant in the relative major. And then this is more straight Gershwin, that instead of going right to the relative major, you go to the relative major with 5 in the bass. And then basically like 6, 2 dominant, 5 sus, all analyzed in the relative major. So that's E flat major here. And then back to the 1 chord, in this case C minor. And I did some sort of thing here, I think, with playing around with that harmonic minor sound. And then into... There, I liked that I had this idea to kind of quote the melody in the bass line. Summertime, and then give the melody back to the right hand and start a short improvised solo in the right hand. Which, you know, my style with that in this format as a soloist is basically like, I'm thinking motivically, like I'm thinking of short motifs that I can explore. And I'm also just playing around a lot with rhythm because I think it's fun when you have a left hand stride pattern. Like I mentioned earlier, you know, I like now often when I'm playing alone at the piano, I do actually want to create a full kind of accompaniment with the left hand. Or between the 2 hands, so that it's not left up to the imagination of the audience. And if you have this kind of steady quarter note pattern, it's the same as what you would get with like the bass and drums in a traditional swing rhythm section. There's so much fun that you can have pushing and pulling against that. So... all of that is like, I'm trying to basically have a metronomic left hand, but my right hand is like, I'm going to push ahead, I'm going to pull back sometimes. And I'm definitely just following my ear in terms of what I want to hear rhythmically there. Like I'm really not thinking analytically at all, as much as possible when I'm improvising, which I think is every improviser's goal, to be able to just follow your ear. But, you know, lest that seem like magic to you, you know, the saying is that like you learn all the information and the theory and the skills as much as you can, and then eventually that lets you forget about it. So I for sure feel that I've been continually going through that process myself in my life as a musician. And yeah, okay. So this is such a different video than most of the videos on my channel. I think if you have continued watching this far, it's because you're a real one. You're a serious piano fluency fan. My guess is that for most viewers of this channel, like the specifics here are not going to make sense for you to try to mimic in your own playing, and that was not my goal. Because I feel that the more important thing, my goal for you, is that if you're interested in the subject of arranging and how to create your own version of a song that you like, whether it's a jazz standard like this or a song in any other style that you want to cover, I would rather you move towards the ability to create your own arrangement than to pick an arrangement like the one that I did of this song and try to kind of do a reenactment of it, or like treat it like this is a piece of classical music that I wrote and now you're gonna like either, you know, transcribe the whole thing and play it note for note, or like I'm sure there may have been some of you who were hoping that I would just give you sheet music of this song. But I prefer not to approach things those ways. You know, that like if you're a more advanced jazz student, certainly something that you can do if you have specific versions of things that you're really curious about and you want to get the most out of them, and be influenced by that musician or improviser. transcribing things note for note by ear is really useful. And basically my feeling about that is if you're not able to transcribe it by ear, it's probably currently a little bit too difficult for you. Like getting spoon-fed specific musical material for a specific like solo or arrangement of a song is something that I made use of at some points. I know there's way more of that now on YouTube than there was when I was learning initially to play jazz piano as a teenager. But for sure, when I was learning, like there were transcription books that I would use. There was like the Charlie Parker Omnibook was this big transcription book of a ton of Charlie Parker solos. And it's great because you can just look and hear somebody's written out all of the notes of the solos that he's played. But what I found was that had much less of an impact on my musicianship than when I picked some really small part of a solo or a recording that I really loved, figured it out by ear, even if it was super painstaking and took me a really long time. Because those were typically things that I loved so much, and because I puzzled over them so much, and I listened so carefully to try to figure out the mystery for myself, that then I was inspired to explore how I could use those little pieces of vocabulary in my own playing and improvising. And that's the thing, as an improviser, and this is true as an arranger or composer too, you actually don't need that many musical building blocks. What you need, though, is to have a really, really deep familiarity with them, and for them to be so connected to your ear that you can pull from them and use them right away in lots of different musical situations. So yeah, that's my take. If you're disappointed at the end of this breakdown that I didn't actually walk through note by note what I did, if you're advanced enough that you can learn note by note what I did, I'd be honored. Go ahead and do a transcription of me. I hope you're also transcribing some of the people who influenced me, like, I don't know, Oscar Peterson or Vince Guaraldi. But yeah, I think for most of you, what I'm hoping you'll have gotten out of this video, if you watch this far, is more the mindsets behind these things. That the process of first like learning the material for a song that you want to cover, you can do that through some combination of finding written resources and using your ear, depending on your level and how developed your ear is. And then you want to be thinking specifically about what instrument are you arranging for, even if you're just typically always arranging for yourself at the piano. Like there's different keyboard patches you might be writing for, and you might be just going for a different kind of emotion or vibe in different situations. So you think about those things. What is the specific situation you're writing for? What are the specific strengths of who you're writing for, even if it's just yourself? And then what is the venue or performance situation that this is aimed at? Are you going to try to play this live for other people? In that case, like, what is the room going to sound like? Or are you doing it for a performance online? In which case, that can really impact the way that you want to approach a cover. So, all right, that's my breakdown of this short summertime video. We're doing things a little more informally right now here at Piano Fluency headquarters because it is the summertime, and I thought this would be fun. So thanks for joining me in this one. And if this felt like totally jumbled to you and you want more methodical, carefully scripted and edited theory content, don't worry. That's the majority of what I do on this channel, and there's plenty more of that coming soon. If you like this more informal approach, there's a part of the weekly live class that I teach to everyone who joins the Piano Fluency program. There's this optional live class that you can come to on Monday nights. And not everyone does, but some students come every week and they love it. I have a lot of fun working directly with the students who join my membership program in that live class. And there's a part of the class where it's just open Q&A from students. It's not always about an arrangement that I did, but it does have more of this feel to it where it's just kind of free-flowing, conversational, and I'm giving you more like behind the scenes of how I think about things as a musician outside of the kind of clinical, like theory, academic context. So anyway, if you like this approach and you'd like to be able to have a conversation like this with me where you can just ask me questions directly, become a member. You can come every week if you want to on Monday nights, and it's a lot of fun. It's a really great group of people who have been coming every week. So you're invited to go do that if you'd like. And with that, this video is long enough at this point. Thanks for joining me. My name is Ted with Piano Fluency.